Good morning, students. Welcome to Zoology webinars of Model School for Senior Intern. Today, in this session, we have continuation of endocrine system. In the previous session, Manoj sir made us understand how endocrine system is evolved and different types of endocrine glands in our body. And also, he discussed about the hormones, classifications, and the types, isn't it? Now, he also made us understand about hypothalamus and pituitary gland and its hormones. Now let us explore and learn more about endocrine glands and their functionings. Welcome Manoj Garu. Good morning,
Good morning,
sir.
madam. Good morning, madam.
Yes, sir. Please continue the session.
Thank you, madam. Good morning, students. Welcome back to yet another zoology webinar class. Students, in my previous class, I started the human endocrine system. In the part 1, I discussed about what is meant by coordination, hypothalamus, hormones, and I explained the structure of pituitary gland. Now let us start this gland is a small round-shaped gland that is present on the floor of the hypothalamus, situated in the bony depression called sella turcica. So this is what I explained in my previous part 1 endocrine system. The pituitary gland is anatomically divided into 3 lobes: anterior lobe, middle lobe, and lobe. So students, if you see in this picture, so this is the hypothalamus, and these are the neurosecretory cells, specialized cells that has got the nature of secretion, and this is hypophyseal portal system, and this is the stalk, which we call it as infundibulum. Students, this yellow colored part is the anterior lobe of gland, and I was told that there are 3 lobes. So there is a middle small lobe situated between these two, between anterior and posterior, but it is almost merged with the anterior lobe. Now let us see the hormones. The 3 lobes of pituitary gland releases a number of different hormones that plays a major role in metabolic activities of our one by one. Now we start with anterior lobe of pituitary gland, which is also called as adenohypophysis. Adenohypophysis. So this adenohypophysis produces 6 major hormones. What are those 6 major hormones produced by the anterior lobe of pituitary gland or adenohypophysis? They are TSH, which means thyroid stimulating hormone, ACTH, adrenal corticotropic hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone, LH, which means luteinizing hormone, growth hormone, that is abbreviated as GH, prolactin, and endorphin. So these are the major hormones that are secreted, synthesized, and secreted by the adenohypophysis. Let us know one by one. So the hormones of the anterior pituitary, 6 hormones: growth hormone, prolactin, thyroid stimulating hormone, which is called as thyrotropin, adrenocorticotropic hormone, it is also called as corticotropin, abbreviated as ACTH, follicle stimulating hormone FSH, luteinizing hormone LH. Students, growth hormone GH, or it is also called as somatotropin. So after our birth, what happens generally as age progresses, our body starts growing. We show development, isn't it? So the growth and development of our body is under the control of this hormone called growth hormone. So as this hormone is responsible for overall growth of our body and body's composition, so this is commonly called as growth hormone, and it is technically called as somatotropin. Students, this is one such hormone which shows its influence or effect on almost all body cells. It mainly acts on the cells of liver and produces insulin-like growth factors. So this growth hormone influences mostly the liver cells, which also acts on almost all body cells, and it stimulates the production of insulin-like growth factors. These insulin-like growth factors are responsible for growth, for cell division and cell differentiation. So the growth is under the control of cell division and cell differentiation. Unless cell division occurs, there won't be growth, isn't it? So the repair work, the regeneration, the growth, the development is under the control of growth hormone. So this growth hormone stimulates the epiphyseal plates in the bones to undergo cell division and responsible for the elongation of the bones. So our bones are elongated according to our growth. They increase in their length. The bones increase in their length by the effect of this hormone. This is also responsible for cell division and as well as cell differentiation. So as a whole, growth hormone promotes growth of the entire body. Repair work is done by the help of this hormone. The body's composition is increased with the help of this growth hormone. Next one is prolactin. This is also called as lactogenic hormone, or this is also called as luteotropic hormone. Luteotropic hormone, abbreviated as LTH. This is the hormone which causes enlargement of the mammary glands of the breasts and prepare them to produce milk, especially in women. This hormone plays a significant role in the development of the breast or mammary glands, especially during pregnancy and during breastfeeding. So if you see a pregnant woman, her breasts are developed, okay, and after the childbirth, that mother feeds baby with her milk. So there is a production of milk from the mammary glands. So both development of the mammary glands, that is nothing but breast, and the production of milk from the breast are under the control of prolactin. This prolactin is present in both males and females, but it shows a very significant role in women. And in women, this prolactin also maintains the corpus luteum after the ovulation process. After the ovulation process, the corpus luteum is maintained by this prolactin such that the pregnancy is sustained or continued. Okay, so this is the function of prolactin or lactogenic hormone. The third one is thyroid stimulating hormone, abbreviated as TSH, or it is also called as thyrotropin. So this is the hormone which is secreted by the adenohypophysis, released into the blood, carried to the thyroid gland. So this reaches the thyroid gland and influences the thyroid gland, or stimulates the thyroid gland to synthesize and secrete its own thyroid hormones. So thyroid is another endocrine gland of our body. Students, see, so the secretion of thyroid hormones by the thyroid gland is under the control of thyroid stimulating hormone. So if thyroid gland, it has to release its own thyroid hormones, it has to be influenced, it has to be stimulated by this TSH. Unless this TSH stimulates the thyroid gland won't be stimulated, or it won't release or secrete its own thyroid hormones, isn't it? So this is the TSH, as it stimulates thyroid gland. So this is called as thyroid stimulating hormone. The fourth one is adrenocorticotropic hormone, abbreviated as ACTH. It is also called as corticotropin. So this is the hormone secreted by the adenohypophysis, released into the body fluids, especially blood, reaches the adrenal gland, which is present at the anterior part of the kidney, isn't it? So once this adrenocorticotropic hormone reaches the adrenal gland, now the adrenal gland is stimulated, it gets influenced by this hormone, and it starts synthesizing and secreting its own hormones called glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and sex corticoids. So all these hormones are collectively called as steroid hormones. Especially these steroid hormones are synthesized and secreted from the adrenal cortex of adrenal gland. So the adrenal cortex of the adrenal gland is stimulated by this adrenocorticotropic hormone, and further it releases its own hormones called steroid hormones, or they are differentiately called as glucocorticoids or mineralocorticoids and sex corticoids. And coming to follicle stimulating hormone, abbreviated as FSH. This FSH is released by the adenohypophysis, same, releases into the blood circulation, reaches the gonads. In males, it reaches the testis. In females, this reaches the ovaries. So both ovaries in females and testis in males are influenced, are affected by this FSH. And by this, what happens in females? The growth and development of ovarian follicles takes place. The growth, the primordial follicle becomes primary follicle, becomes secondary follicle, becomes mature Graafian follicle. So this is how the follicles grow and develop inside the ovaries. So all this is under the influence of FSH. In males, this FSH hormone along with androgens. So androgens are the group of hormones that are usually synthesized by the influence of luteinizing hormone. And one such chief androgen is testosterone. So these androgens are also called as male sex hormones, So in males, this FSH along with this androgens regulates or initiates the spermatogenesis. What is this spermatogenesis, students? Genesis, production. Spermato means sperms. So there is a production of sperms. So FSH initiates and regulates the production of sperms. The process of sperm production is initiated at the age of puberty in boys during adolescence period. So this is how FSH affects differently in females and in males. The sixth hormone is luteinizing hormone, which is abbreviated as LH. In males, this luteinizing hormone is also called as interstitial cells hormone, corticotropic hormone. In males, this LH stimulates the Leydig cells. The Leydig cells are present in between the seminiferous tubules, isn't it? So these Leydig cells are influenced by this LH hormone, and further they secrete androgens. Androgens are nothing but male sex hormones, and the chief androgen is testosterone. So this testosterone is responsible for the appearance of secondary sexual characters in boys during puberty. Students, you have studied in reaching the age adolescence in your 8th class. Do you remember the appearance of secondary sexual characters by the influence of testosterone? Especially in boys, what happens? There is a muscular growth. The muscles become prominent, isn't it? There is a deep, low voice, okay? And the appearance of facial hair, like mouse take, beard appears, or facial hair, axial hair, the growth of pubic hair takes place. At the same time, the growth and development of accessory glands takes place. The reproductive organs development also takes place by the influence of this androgens, testosterone, even the spermatogenesis, the production of sperms also initiated during puberty, especially in boys. So these are called secondary sexual characters. Okay, and while in females, the LH also brings the same secondary sexual characters, but of different kind. What happens in girls during the puberty period? High pitch voice, isn't it? Development of breast, mammary glands, isn't it? And appearance of pubic hair. Okay, development of ovaries, and the initiation of ovulation takes place. So LH hormone in females stimulates ovulation, that is, after the maturation of Graafian follicle, what happens? The release of egg takes place. So the release of egg is called as ovulation. So the ovulation is started by the influence of luteinizing hormone in girls during puberty period. So by this, what happens? The onset of menstrual cycle, the menstrual cycle begins. The maturation of reproductive organs in girls takes place during the puberty by this hormone. So the onset of menstrual cycle takes place, and at the same time the ovaries are stimulated by LH to produce estrogen and progesterone hormone. Further, it also maintains the corpus luteum for sustaining the pregnancy. So these are the hormones, 6 major hormones that are synthesized and secreted by the adenohypophysis, that is anterior lobe of pituitary gland. So all these 6 major hormones plays a very important role in the metabolic function of our body. Now coming to a small zone that is present between anterior lobe and posterior lobe, that is a middle lobe, which is called as pars intermedia. So this pars intermedia is almost matched with anterior lobe. This secretes only one hormone that is called melanocyte stimulating hormone. So what is the function of this melanocyte stimulating hormone? Human beings, this has got no significant role. When it comes to lower invertebrates, this melanocyte stimulating hormone is expected to do the pigmentation process. Even it is expected, or it is believed, that this MSH is responsible for the darkening of hair by the deposition of what? Melanin pigment at the developing hair shaft. But most of the cases, it is believed that the melanocyte stimulating hormone has got no significant role in human beings. Coming to the posterior pituitary lobe, this is also called as neurohypophysis. This neurohypophysis is under direct regulation, under the regulation of hypothalamus. The neurohypophysis cannot synthesize hormones. It simply stores and releases the hormones which are secreted by the hypothalamus and reaches the neurohypophysis. So what are those 2 hormones it stores and releases? They are one oxytocin, another one is vasopressin. This vasopressin is also called as ADH, antidiuretic hormone. These 2 hormones are actually secreted or synthesized by the hypothalamus, not by the neurohypophysis. Students, see, these 2 hormones are actually synthesized by the hypothalamus, and it is released into the neurohypophysis, and it is temporarily stored and released. Hence, these secretions are called as neurosecretions. These 2 hormones are also called as neurosecretions. Now, let us see the function of oxytocin. So, oxytocin is the hormone released from the neurohypophysis into the blood circulation, reaches the involuntary muscles or the smooth muscles of our body and induces their contractions. So the contraction of the smooth muscles is influenced by the oxytocin, and especially in females during pregnancy, almost the pregnancy period, now 9 months pregnancy period is completed and the woman is about to delivery. Okay, so during that time, what happens? She suffers from labor pains. Okay, so powerful contractions of the uterus are brought by this oxytocin. So the uterus consists of a layer of smooth muscles, which shows powerful contractions and relaxations, which are commonly called as labor pains. and these labor pains appear during the childbirth, pregnancy, at the end of the pregnancy, during childbirth. So these powerful contractions are by the influence of oxytocin. This oxytocin is also responsible for the subsequent release of milk from the breast or from the mammary glands. And second hormone from the neurohypophysis is vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone, abbreviated as ADH. This reaches kidneys and affects kidneys and stimulates reabsorption of water and electrolytes, especially by the distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct from the nephric filtrate. Students, in the chapter excretion, in the formation of physiology of urine formation, so after glomerular filtration, what happens? Primary urine is formed. This is also called as glomerular filtrate or nephric filtrate. Now what happens to this primary urine? It passes along the different parts of the renal tubule, isn't it? Through proximal convoluted tubule, through loop of Henle, through distal convoluted tubule, through collecting duct, collecting tubule, isn't it? So especially when this primary urine or the nephric filtrate reaches the distal convoluted tubule, what happens? By the influence of this vasopressin, most of the water and as well as electrolytes or minerals are reabsorbed into the body from the distal convoluted tubule and as well as collecting tubule. So by this, what happens? The urine from the dilute state becomes concentrated. So whenever our body is in shortage of water, there is lack of sufficient water in the body, so our body cannot tend to lose water, isn't it? Already we are shortage of water. So at that time, what happens? This vasopressin is released and it regulates the reabsorption of water. If already our body is full of water, so no water is required, no extra water is required, already we have more water, enough water. So at that time, what happens? The reabsorption of water is not conducted by distal convoluted tubule. At that time, what happens? There is no release of vasopressin. So if water reabsorption has to take place, it is done only by the influence of vasopressin. If no water reabsorption, no vasopressin is released. So this is how it regulates the blood volume, the water volume, and the electrolytes balance in the body. So these are the two hormones which are commonly called as neurosecretions released from the neurohypophysis. So students, look at this picture once again. So this is the anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis, and these are the 6 major hormones synthesized and secreted by the adenohypophysis. And this is the posterior pituitary part, which is called as neurohypophysis. It cannot synthesize its own hormones. Simply it stores, as it receives hormones from the hypothalamus, it stores and releases those two hormones, which are called as neurosecretions. One is oxytocin, and one is vasopressin. So all these hormones play an important role in the metabolic activities of our body. Students, the second important hormone that is situated in the brain is called as pineal gland. So this is the pineal gland. So this is a cross section of our brain. So this is thalamus. So we discussed about this. This is the pituitary gland. Now coming to the diencephalon, and this is the roof of the diencephalon. Almost this is the roof, the dorsal surface of the diencephalon. So see here, there is a structure, blue color structure. Now this part is called as pineal gland. So what is this structure which is present on the dorsal surface of the diencephalon? So this is called as pineal gland. So this is the location of pineal gland. It is of size of rice grain. Students, what is the size of this pineal gland? It is the size of a small rice grain. So see, this is the original brain, the cross section, and see here we see the pineal gland. So this is the magnified picture of our brain. So this is the pineal gland. It is of size of rice grain. The pineal gland is also called as epiphysis cerebri. Why? Because if you see the shape of the pineal gland, so here this is the dorsal surface of the diencephalon. So see here, this is the epiphysis cerebri or the pineal gland, commonly called as pineal gland. So if you see the shape of the gland, it almost resembles the pine cone. So this is the pine cone. This is the pine fruit. Okay. And this is the pine cone, the tip of the pine fruit, pine cone. So almost as it resembles the pine cone, so it has derived the name epiphysis cerebri or pineal gland. So it is a small endocrine gland in the brain about the size of rice grain. So this is the location of exactly the location of the red colored spot. So this is the location of the pineal gland situated on the dorsal surface of the diencephalon. Almost it is a midline, almost at the center of the brain, midline brain structure, and it is an unpaired structure. Only a single pineal gland is present. And the hormone secreted by the pineal gland is melatonin. So melatonin is a serotonin derived hormone. So what does this hormone do? Melatonin do? It plays an important role in the regulation of 24-hour rhythms of our body. That is modulates sleep patterns in both circadian and seasonal cycles. Students, if you see, naturally we wake up and we go to sleep, isn't it? So the natural sleep wake up cycle is under the control of melatonin, or melatonin regulates our natural sleep wake cycle. In fact, it also influences the metabolism, the pigmentation, the menstrual cycle, and the defense capability. So these are also the other functions of melatonin. So melatonin influences all these things in our body: metabolism of our body, the regular metabolism of our body, the pigmentation of our body, especially in females. If you see the menstrual cycle and the defense capability, like the immune system of our body, is also influenced by this melatonin. But the main function of melatonin, the chief function of melatonin, is a regulation of the 24-hour circadian rhythms, diurnal circadian rhythms, or the natural sleep wake up cycles. So students, now coming to the neck region. By this picture, I want you to see the bone of hyoid. So here, see a prominent appearance is there, bulging. Okay, so this is a body of hyoid bone, and this is called as laryngeal prominence. We commonly call it as Adam's apple. So this is the neck region, this is the Adam's apple. So why I am showing this picture is, next I'm going to discuss the thyroid gland. So the thyroid gland is situated just beneath or below this Adam's apple, almost here, very close to the body surface. Now next is thyroid gland. So thyroid gland is the largest endocrine gland of our body. Students, don't get confused, because as you already learned that the largest gland of our body is liver. That is just the largest gland, but very particularly the largest endocrine gland, because liver is not an endocrine gland. Remember this, liver is not an endocrine gland. It is a digestive gland. So the thyroid gland is the largest, first largest endocrine gland, which is endodermal in origin. Okay, so that is the thyroid gland. And what is the location of the thyroid gland? In the neck region. It is exactly situated at the junction between larynx and trachea. So the junction between larynx and trachea. So there we see the thyroid gland. The fully developed thyroid gland resembles a butterfly which spreads its wings. So this almost looks like a butterfly with its wings spread, or you can also compare this shape of the thyroid gland with that of an English alphabet H, isn't it? So this is a fully developed thyroid gland. This is the largest gland. Okay, so 5 centimeters long, 3 centimeters wide, and 2 centimeters thickness. It almost weighs to 25 grams in adults, and this thyroid gland is larger in women than in men, and especially the size of the thyroid gland increases during pregnancy in females. Hence, see, especially women who are carrying, who are pregnant, so generally their blood used to report higher concentrations of thyroid hormones. That is because this thyroid gland is enlarged, or its size is increased during pregnancy. As its size is increased, more and more amount of thyroid hormones are released into the body. So see here in this picture, you can clearly see the location of the thyroid gland in the neck region. So this is the larynx and trachea. So this is the trachea windpipe. So in the respiratory system, we have seen this larynx and trachea, isn't it? Windpipe. So at the junction of larynx and trachea, so we see the butterfly shaped gland, thyroid gland, which is very close to the body's surface just below the Adam's apple. So this is another picture showing the same thyroid gland. So this is the larynx. Students, see, this is the larynx and this is the trachea or windpipe, and these are the cartilaginous rings, isn't it, that support the trachea. Okay, so see here, this is the thyroid gland. So thyroid gland consists of two lobes. So this is a lobular structure. This is one lobe and this is another lobe. So these two lobes are connected by a flap of a thin connective tissue. So this is a flap of thin connective tissue which connects this lobe to this, isn't it? So no, this flap of a thin connective tissue is called as isthmus. Isthmus means connecting bridge. So like this, these two lobes of thyroid gland are connected by this isthmus. So this is one lobe, this is another lobe. So this is the location and the structure of the thyroid gland, divided into two lobes connected by isthmus. Now the thyroid gland, how does this function, or when does this function? So hypothalamus releases some releasing hormones, thyroid releasing hormone. So when this releasing hormone reaches pituitary gland, and by the influence of this releasing hormone, what does this anterior lobe of pituitary gland do? It releases thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone. So when this thyroid stimulating hormone reaches the thyroid gland through blood circulation, now thyroid gland releases its own hormones called T4 and T3. T4 is called tetraiodothyronine, whereas T3 is called as triiodothyronine. Both of them are very much similar in their nature and functioning. Okay, and these hormones T4 and T3 are also called as thyroid hormones, and very particularly T4 is called as thyroxine hormone. Now if you see the microanatomy of thyroid gland, if you see the section of a thyroid gland, it shows some follicles. There are follicular cells inside the follicles and there are some stromal cells. Okay, so this is one follicle, this is another follicle, and this is another follicle. So each thyroid gland consists of numerous follicles. Follicles are nothing but enclosing a small cavity. And here see, these are the follicular cells. These are the follicular cells. These are the follicular cells. And outside the follicles, see here, there are another blue, light blue colored cells are there. These are called as parafollicular cells. So what does the microanatomy of thyroid gland shows? The microscopic level. If you see at the microscopic level, what are the primary features? Three primary features. We see follicles. So these are the follicles. And inside the follicles, we see the follicular cells. And outside the follicles, we see the parafollicular cells. Now coming to the follicular cells. The follicular cells are stimulated by the thyroid stimulating hormone. This thyroid stimulating hormone comes from adenohypophysis. So by the influence of this, the follicular cells are stimulated and they secrete two major hormones called T3, which is called triiodothyronine, and T4, tetraiodothyronine. This tetraiodothyronine is also called as thyroxine. So these are the two major hormones stimulated by the follicular cells of thyroid gland. And the thyroid hormones are created from iodine and a amino acid called as tyrosine. So iodine is very, very important component for the formation of thyroid hormones. Coming to the functioning of the thyroid hormones. So hypothalamus releases hormones to pituitary, anterior lobe of pituitary. Anterior lobe of pituitary releases TSH that reaches thyroid gland. And further, the thyroid gland synthesizes and releases T3 and T4. And these thyroid hormones are responsible for increased metabolism, growth, and development, and they are also responsible for increased catecholamine effect. Let us discuss them in detail. So the function of the thyroid hormones. If you see the metabolic function of thyroid hormones, the thyroid hormones increase the basal metabolic rate, which is commonly called as BMR, basal metabolic rate, and have effects on almost all body tissues. Students, in previous part 1, I told that there are 2 hormones which show their effect almost on all body cells. Generally, the hormones are highly specific, isn't it? They only show their act or influence only on their target cells or tissues, target tissues or target organs. But growth hormone and thyroid hormones, remember these 2 hormones, growth hormone and thyroid hormone, these are the 2 hormones which show their effect or influence almost all body tissues or body cells. All body cells are affected by growth hormone and as well as thyroid hormone. So what does this basal metabolic rate means? What happens at this time? The increased uptake of oxygen by cells takes place. So cells use more and more, utilize more and more oxygen. Cells use more and more ATP and perform more cellular respiration. By this, what happens? As more cellular respiration is performed, more ATP is generated. So cells utilize more ATP and produces more ATP as they are performing a continuous respiration, cellular respiration. So during this process, what happens? The heat generation takes place. The heat is given off. The heat is released into the body, and this heat is supplied to the entire body such that we maintain a constant body temperature, isn't it? So we human beings are homeotherms, isn't it? Birds, mammals, we are homeotherms, as you have studied in first year. So what does this homeotherm means? We maintain a constant body temperature irrespective of the surrounding temperature. So that is possible only because of these thyroid hormones, as these continuously make our cells to perform cellular respiration even during at rest. Even when we are at rest, the cells continuously perform cellular respiration by utilizing more ATP, by using more oxygen, giving more heat, and such that constant body temperature is maintained as we are homeotherms. Not only this thyroid hormone also increases the rate and strength of the heartbeat. The rate of heartbeat is increased. The intensity, the strength of the heartbeat is also increased by this thyroid hormone. And this thyroid hormone also stimulates the process of erythropoiesis. So what does this erythropoiesis mean? Erythropoiesis is the process of production of red blood cells, isn't it? The production of red blood cells is called as erythropoiesis. So this erythropoiesis is stimulated by this thyroid hormone. Not only these metabolic functions, the other metabolic functions are the thyroid hormone also controls the metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So all the metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats is affected, is regulated, or is controlled by the thyroid hormones. If you see the cardiovascular, like increasing the rate of breathing, increasing the rate of heartbeat, consumption of oxygen, the utilization of oxygen by the cells is also increased by increasing the activity of mitochondria, because the cellular respiration is mainly involved, or it is mainly taking place in a cellular level, isn't it? So it also increases the activity of mitochondria such that more and more oxygen is consumed and more cellular respiration is performed. So all these combined factors increase blood flow and the body's temperature. Coming to the developmental functions of thyroid hormone. The thyroid hormones are also important for normal development of our body, both the physical development and as well as the development of brain. So the thyroid hormones play a particularly crucial role in the brain maturation during fetal development and first few years of postnatal life. So during fetus development, so this hormone is very, very essential for the brain maturation. Even after the birth, even first few years of postnatal life also, this thyroid hormone is very, very an important role. It plays a crucial role in the brain maturation. Students, I think you might have seen some children isn't it? Who lacks the brain maturation. Though their physical body grows, their mental development does not take place accordingly, isn't it? We generally see the lack of brain maturation in some children who are the generally the children who are suffering from the shortage of from the deficiency of thyroid hormones. Okay, so especially they lack the brain maturation. So for this, iodine is also essential for the production of thyroid hormones. So iodized salt. So generally, what does a doctor suggest? Doctors suggest us to take the iodide salt because it is responsible or it is essential for the production of thyroid hormones. Now coming to, we discussed about the follicular cells. Follicular cells synthesize two major hormones. Now coming to the parafollicular cells. So these are the parafollicular cells, isn't it? So these follicular cells, we have discussed that. Now coming to these parafollicular cells, they also secrete. These are present outside the follicles, isn't it? So outside the follicles, these are the parafollicular cells. Now what does these parafollicular cells do? They also produce a hormone, a polypeptide hormone called as thyrocalcitonin, which is abbreviated as TCT, thyrocalcitonin. So what does this thyrocalcitonin do? It plays an important role in maintaining proper levels of calcium and phosphates in the blood. So this ensures that there is a sufficient amount of or proper levels of calcium and phosphates in the blood. This thyrocalcitonin is also called as hypocalcemic hormone. Hypocalcemic hormone. Why? Because hypo means below. Calcemic means calcium levels in the blood. So this hormone is responsible in decreasing the calcium levels and as well as phosphate levels in the blood. As this is responsible in decreasing the calcium levels in the blood, hence this is called as hypocalcemic hormone, because this decreases blood calcium. How our blood calcium is decreased? By promoting the deposition of calcium in bones and tissues. So generally, you know that our bones consist of calcium phosphate. In the matrix of bone, we contains this calcium, isn't it? So by the process called mineralization of the bones, absorption of the calcium by the bones, that is called mineralization. So the bones, by depositing this calcium, what happens? So they uptake all the calcium that is available in the blood. So this process is called as absorption, or this is also called as mineralization. So by this, what happens? If all the calcium is taken up by the bones, now the calcium levels in the blood are certainly decreased. Quite naturally, the levels of calcium are decreased. So this is how thyrocalcitonin promotes the mineralization of the bones such that the blood calcium levels are decreased. Hence, this is called as hypocalcemic hormone. Generally, the higher calcium content. So whenever we have higher calcium content in our blood, in the plasma of our blood, so that immediately stimulates the parafollicular cells to secrete this thyrocalcitonin. So whenever we take the calcium rich foods, okay, so immediately what happens in our plasma? The calcium levels are increased. So the increased calcium levels in the plasma stimulates parafollicular cells, and in turn, what does these parafollicular cells do? They release thyrocalcitonin. And what does this thyrocalcitonin do? This decreases calcium levels in the blood by promoting the mineralization process, or by promoting the deposition of calcium. So students, see, this is the thyroid gland. In the thyroid gland, we have follicular cells and as well as parafollicular cells. Okay, we shall come to this slide later. So thyroid gland, okay, calcium levels increase and decrease. I shall explain this slide after parathyroid glands. Now coming to parathyroid glands. So after thyroid gland, there are two pairs of parathyroid glands. See here, two pairs of parathyroid glands that attach to each lobe of the thyroid gland. So this is one lobe, this is another lobe, and this is, yes, isthmus, isn't it? So at the backside of each thyroid lobe, we have one pair of parathyroid glands. So such that on a whole, there are two pairs of small rounded structures that are attached to the two lobes of thyroid gland, which are called as parathyroid glands. So in this picture, you can clearly see how the two pairs of parathyroid glands are attached. If this is one lobe, so for each lobe, you can see on each lobe, a pair of parathyroid glands are present, isn't it? Now, what are these parathyroid glands? The glands positioned higher are called as superior parathyroid, while the lower two are called as inferior parathyroid. So these are placed superficially, means at higher level. So these are called as superior parathyroid glands, and these two are inferiorly placed below, isn't it? So these are called as inferior parathyroid glands. Now each gland is yellowish brown, a flat ovoid shaped, like egg shaped, flat and egg shaped, usually about 6 mm long and 3 to 4 mm wide and 1 to 2 mm thickness. The healthy parathyroid glands weigh about 30 milligrams in men and 35 milligrams in women. So this is also the picture which shows the functioning of parathyroid glands. I'll explain this. Coming to the function. So what does this parathyroid glands do? It releases a hormone called as parathyroid hormone. So the hormone which is synthesized and secreted by the parathyroid glands is parathyroid hormone, abbreviated as PTH, or it is also called as parath hormone. It is also called as parath hormone. So this is commonly called as hypercalcemic hormone. Hypercalcemic. So what does this hypercalcemic means? If you see here, that increases the calcium levels in the blood. So the parath hormone or the parathyroid hormone increases the blood calcium levels by influencing or by the process called resorption of the bones. Resorption means the demineralization process takes place. Students, you have studied about the bone in your first year. Osteoclast, osteoblast, osteocytes. These are the different cells that you find in bone, isn't it? In the matrix of bone, isn't it? So here, if you see, especially, so these osteoclasts are nothing but the phagocytic cells. These phagocytic cells are involved in the process of resorption, that is demineralization, means the bones tend to lose the calcium such that the calcium from the matrix of the bone is released into the blood, such that what happens to the blood calcium levels? They're increased, isn't it? So this parathyroid hormone is responsible in increasing the blood calcium levels, hence this is called as hypercalcemic hormone. So see here what happens? Decrease in calcium levels. This is done by the hormone that is released by the parafollicular cells, isn't it? Whereas parathyroid hormone increases the blood calcium levels. So what does this mean? These two are antagonists to each other. Calcitonin and parathyroid hormone. These two hormones regulate and control the blood calcium phosphate levels in our blood, such that they are working like in opposite way, like antagonistic to each other. So one increases the blood calcium levels, the other decreases the blood calcium levels. So one decreases, calcitonin decreases, and one increases the calcium levels. So this is the function of parathyroid hormone. So parathyroid hormone has effects antagonistic to those of calcitonin. So even the absorption of calcium from the gut, and even what happens, it also influences renal tubules. The reabsorption of calcium from the renal tubules takes place such that more and more calcium is reabsorbed into the blood, and like this more and more blood calcium levels are increased. So this parathyroid hormone not only influences the demineralization process, it also influences the renal tubules to reabsorb more and more calcium from it also influences the gut. It also influences the gut to absorb more and more calcium from the gut. Now, the parathyroid hormone is produced in response to low blood calcium. So, whenever we have low blood calcium levels, so these low blood calcium levels, this condition produces or sends signals such that the parathyroid glands release the parathyroid hormone and such that the blood calcium levels are increased, isn't it? Now, the PTH also promotes, this is very important point, the PTH, it also promotes the activation of vitamin D into its active form called calcitriol. Actually, the vitamin D is in inactive form, that is calciferol. Calciferol is the inactive form of vitamin D. So when this parathyroid hormone or it influences this inactive form of calciferol. So this inactive form of calciferol is converted into its active form, and its active form is called as calcitriol. So the PTH also promotes the activation of vitamin D, that is converting the inactive calciferol into active calcitriol. Coming to one more endocrine gland, that is thymus gland. So thymus gland, this is the chest region, isn't it? The chest region. Here we have two lungs, right lung and left lung. In between, a small space is present called mediastinum, and in which the heart is situated, isn't it? So just above the heart, isn't it? Almost in front of the aorta, we got another gland called thymus gland. So this is the location of the thymus gland. Actually, it is a primary lymphoid organ. It is an important organ of immune system. Okay, so it lies in the upper front just behind the sternum. So here we got a chest bone or breastbone called sternum. So just behind this sternum, above the heart, in front of the heart. Okay, so we got a gland called thymus gland. Students, generally at children's at birth, so this thymus gland is smaller in size, and as age progresses, so children become like we come to adolescent period. So on reaching puberty, so gradually what happens to this small sized thymus gland, it reaches its maximum growth. So during puberty, we see the maximum size of the thymus gland, and when it comes into adults, this thymus gland starts shrinking, that is decreasing in its size, and almost in old persons this thymus gland is almost degenerated. This becomes non-functional and it is completely degenerated in old persons. So in adults it gets shrink, it reaches its maximum size in children of age puberty. Okay, on reaching adolescent age, so at that age, so this reaches its maximum size. At birth it is very smaller in size. So this is the picture which shows the thymus gland, the location of the thymus gland. So see here, in adults almost the thymus gland is decreasing in its size, whereas in child, see this is the child, so this is how it is of its maximum size. So it is fully developed at the age of puberty, and after puberty when the children are turning into adults, so this starts shrinking and the size of the thymus gland is decreased greatly, and when it comes into older person, this is completely degenerated and becomes non-functional. Coming to its stats, so the size is around, its weight is, so at birth it is about 4 to 6 centimeters long, 2.5 to 5 centimeters wide, and 1 centimeters thick. Coming to the function of thymus, so thymus gland plays a very important role or significant role in strengthening the immune system. It produces, the thymus gland produces a hormone called as thymosin. This thymosin is the hormone which is responsible for the differentiation of T lymphocytes. So what are these lymphocytes? I have explained about these lymphocytes in the lymphatic system, isn't it? These are the white blood cells which are present in the lymph, isn't it? Hence they are called as lymphocytes. These are the phagocytoid cells, isn't it? They attack the microorganisms that might do harm or that might do harm to the body, isn't it? So they are attacked by these lymphocytes, providing protection to the body, isn't it? So these lymphocytes, T lymphocytes, so as these lymphocytes reach thymus gland, and by the influence of this thymosin, so these lymphocytes, so the T lymphocytes maturation or the T lymphocytes differentiation takes place with the help of thymosin, and which also provides cell mediated immunity, because as these T lymphocytes are involved in providing immunity, so that is called as cell mediated immunity. And the thymosin hormone also promotes the production of antibodies. So antibodies are nothing but the proteins, isn't it? So as these antibodies are produced in response to antigens, the antigens are nothing but the foreign particles that enter from outside into the body. Okay, any foreign particle that enters into our body is called as antigen. So in response to antigen, antibodies are produced, and these antibodies also protect our body by giving immunity. So such immunity is called as humoral immunity. So the production of antibodies is also influenced or regulated by thymosin. So greatly the thymosin is playing an important role in strengthening the immune system, more of endocrine system. Thymosin plays a significant role in the immune system. So students, let us recap of today's session, what we have discussed so far. So we started with a pituitary gland and the pituitary hormones. We have seen a number of different pituitary hormones synthesized and secreted by the anterior lobe, stored and released by the posterior lobe, isn't it? And also from the pars intermedia. And we gone through the pineal gland, its structure, and the hormone melatonin, its function. We have seen the thyroid gland, the first largest endocrine gland of our body, and the thyroid hormones, two major thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, and the parafollicular cells of thyroid gland, calcitonin. Okay, we have seen the function of calcitonin, hypocalcemic hormone. And coming to the parathyroid glands, two pairs of parathyroid glands are present attached to thyroid gland, isn't it? One pair on each lobe. At the back side of the thyroid gland, we have seen parathyroid glands, a small, flat, ovoid shaped, isn't it? And they release another hormone called as parath hormone. This is also called as hypercalcemic. So this is hypocalcemic and this is hypercalcemic. Hyper means increasing, above, increases blood calcium levels. Hypo means below, decreases blood calcium levels. And finally, we have seen thymus gland. This is also called as breast gland because almost it is situated in the chest region, So this is called as thymus gland, and the secretion of the thymus gland is called as thymosin. And what does this thymosin do? So this is involved in the differentiation of T lymphocytes, providing cell mediated immunity, and as well as production of antibodies providing humoral immunity. So these are the endocrine glands we have discussed in our today's session, and there are two more glands. There are more endocrine glands to be discussed, and we shall meet in another webinar session. Thank you.
Sir, Manoj sir, beautiful session, sir. Thank you very much for the second session of endocrine glands in humans. Definitely the students who are preparing to be benefited from this session. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Students, please note down and make running notes out of this, because the sir, whatever the information he's sharing with us, you cannot find in all the textbooks. Sir has pulled up from various textbooks and he made a PPT so that you would be benefited from all these points. Okay, please do that. Thank you.